The corporate world loves to chew people up and spit them out when they think those people are no longer useful. I learned this truth on a cold Tuesday morning when the receptionist refused to look at my face while an urgent notification flashed across my phone screen. It was a mandatory meeting request with my manager Beatrice, and the subject line was typed in aggressive capital letters. This sudden hostility was wild because I had just finished 12 consecutive quarters of record-breaking financial growth for our firm Vanguard Holdings. Just 3 weeks ago I secured the massive sterling contract which was projected to bring in millions of dollars. I built that massive partnership from scratch using a simple sketch on a napkin. Yet here I was being summoned like a criminal who had violated company policy. As I walked down the main corridor, I noticed my coworker Beatrice whispering frantically to someone in her office with a fake sympathetic smile. It was the exact same look she gave other employees right before terminating them. Several colleagues suddenly avoided my gaze, and one guy I mentored for years quickly stepped into the copy room. That was the moment I knew the decision had already been made. Instead of panicking, I calmly walked into my office and unlocked the bottom drawer to retrieve my original employment agreement. I flipped past the standard legal jargon directly to Section 12 subsection B, which I had fiercely renegotiated the previous year. That specific page contained my financial safety net against corporate greed. I carefully placed the paperwork inside my leather folder, adjusted my jacket, and walked toward the trap. Before I reveal how their cheap trap cost them millions of dollars, feel free to subscribe to the channel and support these stories. Watching a greedy corporate empire crumble under its own weight is always worth a moment of your time. I adjusted my posture and marched directly into the lion den, ready to face whatever foolish game they planned to play against me. When I opened the door to the conference room, the blinds were drawn and Beatrice was sitting stiffly next to 2 HR representatives. There were no laptops or performance reports on the table, which proved this was an execution rather than a discussion. Beatrice offered a weak grimace that she tried to pass off as genuine empathy. She asked me to take a seat, but I remained standing. Beatrice cleared her throat and stated that the company was restructuring and my executive position was eliminated effective immediately. She claimed the decision was final and had been fully approved by our Chief Executive Officer Vance. Vance did not even have the courage to face me himself after everything I did for his business. I simply nodded my head without showing a single trace of emotion. They demanded my security badge, and I handed it over with a polite smile before leaving the room. What Beatrice and Vance failed to realize was that firing me exactly 1 day before my massive equity shares vested did not save them money. It actually triggered the hidden penalty in Section 12 subsection B. They did not just owe me my standard bonus anymore, they now owed me double that amount. I walked past my old office without looking back because I knew they would pack my belongings later. Instead of taking the elevator down to the parking garage, I rode it up to the 45th floor where the legal department operated. I knew exactly who still possessed a shred of integrity in that corporate office. I dropped my heavy leather folder onto the desk of an assistant counsel named Logan. Logan looked up in surprise as I told him I had just been terminated and needed his immediate assistance. He closed his office door and asked if I was doing all right after the sudden ambush. I explained that I was fired without cause and that management completely ignored my incentive terms. I opened the folder and pointed directly to the specific legal definitions regarding my transitional risk protections. Logan scanned the lines carefully and his eyes widened as he realized the magnitude of the mistake management had made. He confirmed that the contract was airtight and specified that any termination within 24 hours of vesting triggered immediate acceleration. He laughed quietly and noted that leadership thought termination would void the obligation when it actually activated the payout. I told him I wanted enforcement rather than revenge. After leaving Logan, I went down the hall to find an experienced analyst named Tabitha who possessed deep institutional knowledge. She was the very first intern I had ever mentored years ago when she still believed HR protected workers. I handed her the complete documentation packet, including the digital signature metadata from Beatrice. Tabitha opened the files slowly and began reviewing the specific financial triggers. Tabitha gasped as she calculated the accelerated payout, which equaled twice the equity value plus my full base salary. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and immense respect for my foresight. I explained that I wrote this specific language while recovering from an illness in a hospital bed years ago. I was always playing 10 steps ahead of the executives who treated me like a disposable asset. Meanwhile, down in the HR department, a massive wave of panic was starting to take hold of Beatrice. She stormed into the records room, demanding that the staff find some form of negative documentation against me. She desperately needed a written warning or a performance complaint to justify my termination after the fact. The HR assistant typed furiously but confirmed that my record was completely flawless. The lead corporate counsel, named Meredith, was then notified of the situation by Tabitha and Logan. Meredith reviewed the contract, turned incredibly pale, and immediately marched into the room where Beatrice was sweating. Meredith held up the signed document and asked Beatrice if she realized what she had signed during the winter session. Beatrice stammered that she did not read the fine print because Vance wanted the process rushed. Meredith explained that the foolish attempt to save $4 million had actually triggered a $6 million liability. The room fell into a dead silence as the realization of their catastrophic failure settled over them. A high-priority calendar invite was instantly sent to the board of directors regarding an emergency review of my package. I was already sitting in a nearby cafe watching the corporate building. My phone rang an hour later, and I saw it was a prominent board member named David. He asked if I truly intended to enforce the massive penalties defined in the contract. I told him that management made their choice and I was simply following the agreed terms. David admitted that the risk shield I designed was brilliant and that the chief financial officer had confirmed the $6 million figure. Back in the executive suite, Vance was pacing around the room angrily while Meredith explained the legal reality. Vance tried to argue that we could negotiate or offer a smaller settlement package to resolve the dispute. Meredith looked at him coldly and stated that I had already declined any mediation because I held all the power. She warned Vance that the board would likely hold him personally liable for the damage. A few days later, a formal notification arrived in my personal inbox from the external legal counsel of the board. They officially acknowledged the terms of Section 12 subsection B and authorized a wire transfer of over $6 million. Beatrice was forced to resign from her position due to her gross negligence. Vance was stripped of his authority and moved to a meaningless department with no actual budget. I sat by the pool at my new hotel looking at the city skyline, feeling a deep sense of clarity. I sent a final message to the board chair referencing the exact line of the contract they had violated. I did not burn the bridge down, I simply collected the rent for the ashes they left behind. True power comes from knowing your worth and ensuring the fine print protects you.